The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Adelaide Foster stumbled through the doors of the saloon in Bannack, Montana Territory. Her dress torn and face streaked with dried tears and dirt from 3 days of hard travel. She collapsed against the doorframe, her small carpet bag dropping from trembling fingers, and the room fell silent as every eye turned to witness her desperation. "Water," she managed, her voice cracking like old leather. "Please." The bartender, a grizzled man with sympathetic eyes, poured her a glass before she even made it to the bar. Adelaide drank it so quickly that half of it spilled down the front of her already ruined dress, but she didn't care. When the glass was empty, she set it down with shaking hands and whispered to no one in particular, "I've lost everything." A man at the far end of the bar looked up from his whiskey. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. Harrison Tate had been minding his own business, as he usually did when he came into town for supplies, but something about the woman's voice cut through his usual isolation like a knife through warm butter. He stood, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and walked toward her. Up close, he could see she was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark blonde hair that had come loose from its pins and green eyes that held more sorrow than any person should carry. "You have found me," Harrison said quietly, his voice deep and steady. "And that is a start." Adelaide looked up at him, confusion mingling with her exhaustion. "I don't understand." "You need help," he said simply. "I am offering it, no strings, no expectations. Just a place to rest and figure out your next step." She studied his face, searching for deception or ulterior motives, but found only genuine concern. In her desperate state, with no money, no family, and no prospects, she had little choice but to accept. "I don't even know you. Name is Harrison Tate. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here. You can stay in the main house while my foreman and I bunk in the smaller cabin. You will be safe, I give you my word." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Adelaide asked, though even as the words left her mouth, she was already reaching for her carpet bag. "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing," Harrison replied. "And because it is the right thing to do." The ride to Harrison's ranch was quiet except for the sound of horse hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels. Adelaide sat beside him on the bench seat, clutching her bag to her chest like it contained treasures, rather than the few remaining possessions she had managed to grab before fleeing her old life in Denver. She wanted to tell him her story, to explain why she had arrived in Bannack looking like she had been through a war, but the words stuck in her throat. Harrison didn't push. He kept his eyes on the road and gave her the silence she needed. When they arrived at the ranch, Adelaide was surprised by how well maintained everything appeared. The fences were sturdy, the barn freshly painted, and the house, though modest, had a welcoming quality that made her chest ache with longing for stability. "It is not fancy," Harrison said as he helped her down from the wagon, his large hands steadying her with surprising gentleness. "But it is clean and warm." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a worn leather sofa and 2 chairs arranged around it. The kitchen was small but functional, and through an open doorway she could see a bedroom with a quilt-covered bed that looked like heaven after 3 nights of sleeping in coach stations. "You take the bedroom," Harrison said. "I will bring in some fresh water so you can wash up. There is a robe hanging on the back of the door if you want to clean your dress." Adelaide nodded, still too overwhelmed to form proper words of gratitude. As Harrison stepped back outside, she sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry in earnest. The tears came in great, shuddering sobs that left her gasping and exhausted, but also somehow cleansed. She cried for her parents, dead from cholera 3 months ago. She cried for her fiancé, who had stolen the last of her family's money and disappeared into the night. She cried for her childhood home, sold to pay debts she hadn't even known existed. She cried until there were no more tears left, and then she lay on that soft bed and slept like the dead. When Adelaide woke, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She could smell something cooking, and her stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. After washing her face and hands in the basin of fresh water Harrison had left, she ventured back into the main room. Harrison stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He had changed into a clean shirt and had washed up himself, his dark hair still slightly damp. "I am not a great cook," he admitted when he saw her, "but I can make a decent stew. Are you hungry?" "Starving," Adelaide admitted, and was rewarded with a small smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. They ate at the small wooden table, and for a while the only sounds were spoons against bowls and the crackling fire. Finally, Adelaide set down her spoon and said, "I should explain." "Only if you want to," Harrison replied. "You have been so kind. You deserve to know who you have taken in." She took a deep breath. "My name is Adelaide Foster. I am from Denver. My parents died 3 months ago from cholera. My fiancé, or rather my former fiancé, was helping me settle the estate, or so I thought. Instead, he took everything that was left and disappeared. The bank took the house. I had nothing but what I could carry and a ticket to Bannack that I had purchased weeks ago when I thought I was coming to start a new life as a wife." Harrison listened without interruption, his steady gaze never leaving her face. "I thought about going back east to my aunt," Adelaide continued. "But I couldn't bear the thought of arriving on her doorstep as a charity case. So I came here anyway, even though the man I was supposed to marry is gone and I have no prospects whatsoever." She laughed bitterly. "I suppose I thought that starting over in a new place might somehow make me a new person too. Starting over is harder than people think," Harrison said quietly, "but it can be done. I know because I did it myself 5 years ago." "What happened?" Adelaide asked. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. "I was a soldier, fought in the war. When it ended, I came back to nothing. My family's farm had been destroyed, my parents were dead, my brother was missing. I drifted for a while, doing odd jobs, trying to find some purpose. Eventually, I ended up here in Montana Territory. A man named Samuel Grant owned this ranch. He was getting old and needed help. He took me in, taught me ranching, and when he died 2 years ago, he left me the land." "That was incredibly generous," Adelaide said softly. "He had no family of his own. He said I reminded him of his son who died in the war. He gave me a second chance, and I've tried every day to live up to that gift." Harrison met her eyes. "That is why I stopped when I saw you today. I know what it feels like to have lost everything, and I know how much one person's kindness can change the course of a life." Adelaide felt fresh tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the ones she had cried earlier. These were tears of gratitude, of unexpected hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly?" Harrison nodded. "You can stay as long as you need. There is always work on a ranch if you want to earn your keep, but there is no pressure. Just rest and heal first." Over the next few days, Adelaide did exactly that. She slept in the comfortable bed, ate the simple but nourishing meals Harrison prepared, and slowly began to feel like a human being again rather than a hollow shell of grief and betrayal. Harrison was gone most of the day, working the ranch with his foreman, a weathered man named Joe who tipped his hat to Adelaide but kept a respectful distance. On the 4th day, Adelaide woke feeling stronger than she had in months. She dressed in one of the simple cotton dresses she had brought with her, braided her hair, and decided it was time to stop being a burden. She found Harrison in the barn, mending a saddle. "Teach me," she said without preamble. Harrison looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to work a ranch, how to be useful. I cannot just sit in that house forever. You have been through a lot. No one expects you to work." "I expect me to work," Adelaide said firmly. "I am tired of being helpless. I am tired of depending on others. I want to learn how to take care of myself." Harrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we start easy. Can you cook?" Adelaide laughed, the first genuine laugh she had managed in months. "Better than you can, I would wager." "That is not hard," Harrison admitted with a hint of humor. "How about this? You take over the cooking and the house. In return, I will teach you about horses, about ranching, about everything you want to know." "Deal," Adelaide said, extending her hand. When Harrison took it, his hand warm and calloused against hers, something electric passed between them. They both felt it. Both pulled back a little too quickly. Both pretended it hadn't happened. But it had. True to his word, Harrison began teaching Adelaide about ranch life. She learned how to feed the horses, how to muck out stalls, how to check for signs of illness or injury in the animals. Her hands, soft and pale from a life of relative ease in Denver, began to roughen and callous. Her skin, which she had always protected from the sun, took on a golden tone. Her body, unused to such physical labor, ached at first but gradually grew stronger. In turn, Adelaide transformed the ranch house into a real home. She cooked proper meals that made both Harrison and Joe groan with appreciation. She cleaned and organized, mended curtains, and planted a small herb garden near the kitchen door. She found herself singing while she worked, something she hadn't done since before her parents died. Harrison watched these changes with growing admiration. Adelaide wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The broken, desperate woman who had stumbled into the saloon was being replaced by someone confident and capable. He found himself looking for excuses to come back to the house during the day, to see her smile, to hear her laugh, to talk with her about everything and nothing. One evening, about 3 weeks after Adelaide's arrival, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of pine and wildflowers. "I have been thinking," Adelaide said carefully, "about what comes next." Harrison felt his stomach tighten. He had known this moment would come, had been dreading it even as he knew it was inevitable. "Oh, I need to find work in town. I cannot stay here forever, living off your charity." "It is not charity," Harrison said, more sharply than he intended. "You have more than earned your keep. The house has never been this clean, the meals have never been this good, and you have helped with the horses more than you know." "Still," Adelaide said gently, "I need to stand on my own feet. I need to know I can take care of myself." "I understand," Harrison said, even though every part of him wanted to argue to convince her to stay. "What kind of work are you thinking about?" "The school teacher is looking for an assistant. I saw a notice in town last week. I had a good education. I could do that work." Harrison nodded slowly. The thought of Adelaide leaving the ranch, of not seeing her every day, felt like someone was twisting a knife in his gut. When had she become so essential to his daily happiness? When had he started listening for her footsteps in the morning, looking forward to her conversation at dinner, falling asleep thinking about the way she laughed? "That sounds like good work," he managed to say. Adelaide looked at him, really looked at him, and Harrison wondered if she could see right through him. "Would you miss me?" she asked softly. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Harrison could lie, could protect himself from the vulnerability of truth. Or he could be brave. Yes, he said simply. I would miss you very much. Adelaide's breath caught. I would miss you too. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their admission settling around them like a blanket. Finally, Harrison turned to face her fully. Adelaide, I know this is probably too soon. I know you have been through hell and you came here to escape one bad situation, and the last thing you need is another complication. But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that having you here these past weeks has been the happiest I have been since I came to Montana Territory. Adelaide's eyes were wide, shining in the fading light. Harrison, I am not asking for anything, he continued quickly. I just wanted you to know. Before you make any decisions about leaving, I wanted you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it. Not as a charity case or a housekeeper, but as someone I care about deeply. I care about you too, Adelaide whispered. More than I should, probably. More than is wise. Why is it not wise? Harrison asked, leaning closer. Because I am broken. Because I trusted someone before and he destroyed me. Because I am afraid that if I let myself feel something for you, I will just get hurt again. Harrison reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I cannot promise you will never be hurt. Life is full of hurt. But I can promise that I will never betray you. I can promise that I will work every day to be worthy of your trust. And I can promise that whatever you are feeling, I am feeling it too. Adelaide's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I came here with nothing. I thought my life was over. And then you appeared and offered me hope when I had none. How could I not fall for you? Is that what this is? Harrison asked, his voice rough with emotion. Falling? I think I have been falling since the moment you said I had found you, and that was a start, Adelaide admitted. I just was too scared to admit it. Harrison pulled her closer until they were just inches apart. Can I kiss you? He asked. Yes, Adelaide breathed. Please. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing these new waters. But then Adelaide's hands came up to cup Harrison's face, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, both smiling like fools. So you will stay? Harrison asked. I will stay, Adelaide confirmed. Not in the house, not if we are courting properly. I will take a room in town, maybe still work with the school teacher, but I will stay. Harrison nodded, understanding the need for propriety even as he wished he could keep her close every moment. I will court you properly then, with flowers and dinners and everything a lady deserves. Adelaide laughed, joy bubbling up from deep inside her. I look forward to it. The courtship that followed was indeed proper, much to the approval of the townsfolk of Bannack, who had been curious about the mysterious woman staying at the Tate Ranch. Adelaide took a small room above the general store and began helping the elderly schoolteacher, Mrs. Patterson, with the younger children. Harrison came to town 3 times a week, always with flowers or small gifts, always asking permission before taking her for walks or dinners. But despite the propriety, the connection between them deepened with every meeting. They talked about everything, their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Adelaide told Harrison about growing up in Denver, about her parents who had encouraged her education and independence, about the devastation of losing them so suddenly. Harrison shared his war experiences, the nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the night, the guilt he carried for surviving when so many others hadn't. They also laughed together, discovering shared humor and joy in small things. Harrison taught Adelaide to ride properly, and she proved to be a natural horsewoman. Adelaide introduced Harrison to poetry and literature, reading to him in the evenings when he came to call. They were building something real and solid, brick by brick, day by day. 2 months into their courtship, Harrison invited Adelaide to a barn dance being held at a neighboring ranch. It was a warm August evening, and Adelaide wore her best dress, a blue cotton that matched her eyes. When Harrison saw her, his expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You look stunning," he said, offering his arm. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Adelaide teased. Harrison wore dark trousers and a white shirt, his hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. The dance was held in a large barn decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. A fiddle band played lively tunes and couples spun and laughed across the floor. Harrison, who Adelaide had worried might not know how to dance, proved surprisingly skilled. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked as he twirled her expertly. "My mother taught me," Harrison said with a smile. "She said every gentleman should know how to dance, even if he planned to be a farmer." They danced until Adelaide's feet ached and her face hurt from smiling. During a slow song, Harrison pulled her close, his hand firm on her back, his breath warm against her ear. "I love you," he whispered. "I probably should wait to say it, should make it some grand gesture, but I cannot keep it in any longer. I love you, Adelaide Foster." Adelaide's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. "I love you too, Harrison Tate, so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," Harrison murmured. "We will figure this out together." As the song ended, Harrison led her outside where the air was cooler and they could talk privately. Stars blazed overhead, more than Adelaide had ever seen in the city. "Marry me," Harrison said suddenly. Adelaide laughed in surprise. "That is the least romantic proposal I have ever heard." Harrison grinned, then dropped to one knee right there in the grass. "Adelaide Foster, you are the strongest, most beautiful, most incredible woman I have ever known. You came into my life when I had given up on the idea of love, and you changed everything. Would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Adelaide said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him soundly. "Yes, yes, yes." The wedding was held 6 weeks later, in early October, when the aspens had turned gold and the air had the crisp edge of approaching winter. It was a simple ceremony at the small church in Bannack, with Joe as Harrison's best man and Mrs. Patterson as Adelaide's witness. Adelaide wore a cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself with fabric Harrison had bought her as a wedding gift. Harrison wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling the entire day. After the ceremony, they held a celebration at the ranch, which Joe and several neighbors had helped decorate. There was food and music and dancing, and as the sun set, Harrison swept Adelaide into his arms and carried her into the house amid cheering and laughter. "Hello, wife," he said, setting her down gently in their bedroom. "Hello, husband," Adelaide replied, her hands coming up to loop around his neck. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, both of them nervous and excited in equal measure. Harrison was patient and gentle, making sure Adelaide felt loved and cherished. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, both glowing with happiness, Adelaide felt like the broken pieces of herself had finally been put back together, stronger than before. "I cannot believe this is my life now," she whispered into the darkness. "What do you mean?" Harrison asked, his hand stroking her hair. "A few months ago I had nothing. No family, no money, no hope. And now I have you and this ranch and a future I actually want. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I hope we never wake up," Harrison murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The first months of their marriage were a period of adjustment and joy. Adelaide threw herself into making the ranch house truly theirs, adding feminine touches that softened the rough edges of a bachelor's home. She sewed new curtains, braided rag rugs, and planted bulbs that would bloom in the spring. Harrison taught her more about ranching, and Adelaide proved to have a good head for business, helping him organize his accounts and plan for the future. They worked hard during the day and loved each other fiercely at night. They had their disagreements, of course. Harrison could be stubborn and set in his ways, and Adelaide had a temper when pushed. But they always talked through their problems, always went to bed on good terms, always remembered that they were partners in this life they were building together. Winter came hard and fast that year, with snow piling up to the windows and temperatures that could freeze skin in minutes. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading and talking and simply being together. Adelaide taught Harrison card games she had learned as a child. Harrison taught Adelaide to whittle, and soon she was creating small wooden animals that she planned to give to the school children in the spring. It was during one of these cozy winter evenings that Adelaide realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but hadn't said anything, wanting to be sure. Now, watching Harrison concentrate on carving a wooden horse, she knew it was time to tell him. "Harrison," she said softly. He didn't look up from his carving. "I have some news." Something in her tone made him set down the wood and knife and give her his full attention. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Adelaide said, reaching for his hand. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Harrison just stared at her, processing the words. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Truly, we are going to be parents, truly," Adelaide confirmed, laughing as he pulled her into his arms. "This is the best news," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "The absolute best news. When? I think sometime in June, if my calculations are right." Harrison pulled back to look at her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I love you so much. You have given me everything. A home, a purpose, a future, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Adelaide said. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Adelaide's initial fears. She had heard horror stories from other women about sickness and complications, but aside from some tiredness in the early months, she felt well. Harrison was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her doing too much work. "I am pregnant, not dying," Adelaide would remind him gently when he tried to stop her from doing normal tasks. "I know," Harrison would say, "but you are carrying our child. That is precious cargo." In March, when the snow finally began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, they spent an afternoon setting up a nursery in the small room off their bedroom. Adelaide had sewn tiny clothes from soft cotton fabric, and Harrison had built a beautiful wooden cradle with carved designs along the sides. "What do you think it will be?" Harrison asked as they arranged things. "A boy or a girl? I do not care as long as the baby is healthy," Adelaide said. "Though I admit, part of me hopes for a boy who looks just like you." "And part of me hopes for a girl who looks just like you," Harrison countered, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his hands on her swelling belly. "Either way, this child is going to be so loved." The baby, a boy they named Henry, arrived on a warm June morning with relatively little fuss, much to the relief of everyone involved. Dr. Mitchell, who had ridden out from Bannack, declared it one of the easiest births he had ever attended. Adelaide, exhausted but glowing, held her son and marveled at his tiny fingers and perfect features. "He has your nose," she told Harrison, who sat beside the bed looking at Henry with wonder. "He has your chin," Harrison replied, "and your determination, I think." "Did you hear how loudly he announced his arrival?" They laughed together, giddy with exhaustion and joy and the overwhelming love they felt for this tiny person they had created. The first year of Henry's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Adelaide discovered reserves of patience she hadn't known she possessed, and Harrison proved to be a devoted father, always willing to walk a fussy baby or change a diaper despite the teasing from Joe and the other ranch hands. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Adelaide's organizational skills and Harrison's hard work proved to be a winning combination. They added more cattle, repaired and expanded the barn, and even hired 2 more hands to help with the increased workload. When Henry was 2 years old, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder. She was more tired, more sick, and by the end, much more uncomfortable. But in February, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Sarah. "Now we have one of each," Harrison said, cradling his daughter while Henry climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "Our family is complete, complete," Adelaide said with a smile. "Are you saying no more children?" "I am saying whatever you want," Harrison replied. "You are the one who has to carry them and birth them. I am just the lucky man who gets to love you and them." Adelaide reached up to cup his face. "I love our family. I love this life we have built. Sometimes I still cannot believe it all started with me stumbling into that saloon, desperate and alone. And me sitting there, thinking I was content with my solitary life," Harrison added, "not realizing I was waiting for you." The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Henry grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses and could often be found in the barn helping his father. Sarah was wild and free-spirited, always coming home with scraped knees and tall tales of her adventures. Adelaide and Harrison added one more child to their family when Sarah was 3, another boy they named Thomas, who seemed to be a perfect blend of both his siblings' personalities. The ranch expanded steadily. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original building as a guest house and office. Harrison gained a reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher, and Adelaide became known for her charity work in Bannack, helping new arrivals get established just as Harrison had helped her so many years ago. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison planned a surprise for Adelaide. He arranged for the children to spend the night with Joe, who now had a wife and children of his own, and took Adelaide on a ride up into the mountains. "Where are we going?" Adelaide asked, though she was happy to go anywhere with him. "You will see," Harrison said mysteriously. They rode for about an hour before reaching a clearing Adelaide had never seen before. It overlooked a valley painted in the colors of sunset, with a stream running through it and wildflowers blooming everywhere. "It is beautiful," Adelaide breathed. "This is where I came the day I met you," Harrison said, dismounting and helping her down. "After I left you at the ranch to rest, I came up here to think about what I had just done, taking in a complete stranger." "Were you having second thoughts?" Adelaide asked. "No," Harrison said. "I was thinking about how right it felt. How the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you, like we were meant to find each other." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small box. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring. We married so quickly and money was tighter then, but I have been saving and I wanted to give you this on our anniversary." Inside the box was a gold ring with a small but perfect sapphire. Adelaide gasped. "Harrison, it is too much." "It is not nearly enough for what you mean to me," Harrison said, slipping it onto her finger. 10 years ago, you whispered you had lost everything, and I told you that you had found me, and that was a start. I want you to know that you did not just find me that day. You saved me. You made me whole. You gave me a life worth living." Adelaide threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me too. You gave me hope when I had none. You taught me to trust again. You loved me back to life." They stayed in that clearing until the stars came out, talking and laughing and remembering their journey together. They made love under the vast Montana sky, not as the desperate young people they had been, but as partners who had weathered storms and celebrated victories side by side. As they lay tangled together afterward, Adelaide said, "Do you remember what you said that first day? That someone had helped you once when you had nothing and you were paying it forward." "I remember," Harrison murmured. "I have been thinking about that a lot lately. About how kindness ripples outward. You helped me, and now we help others. The children we take in when families are struggling, the new settlers we give advice to, the neighbors we support when times are hard. We are creating ripples of kindness." "That is a nice way to think about it," Harrison said. "I want our children to understand that," Adelaide continued. "That we have so much because someone gave your father a chance, because your father gave me a chance, because we gave each other a chance. And that they should always look for ways to give others chances too." "They are learning that from watching you," Harrison said. "You are an amazing mother and an amazing woman, Adelaide Tate." The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as all lives do. They lost Joe to a heart attack when Henry was 12, and Adelaide mourned the loss of the man who had been their first friend in Bannack. Mrs. Patterson passed the following year, and Adelaide took over full responsibility for the school, which had grown to accommodate the increasing number of families in the area. Harrison's hair turned gray at the temples, and Adelaide found lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But they aged together, their love deepening with every year that passed. They celebrated their children's accomplishments and supported them through their struggles. They continued to build their ranch and their community, becoming pillars of Bannack society. Henry, true to his serious nature, became a lawyer and moved to Helena, though he came home often to visit. Sarah, surprising everyone, became a doctor after traveling east for medical school, one of the few women in her class. She returned to Montana and opened a practice in Bannack, determined to serve the community that had raised her. Thomas took over the ranch, proving to be as skilled a rancher as his father, with his mother's head for business. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become legendary in the area for their love story and their generosity. As Adelaide and Harrison danced together in the barn where they had first said they loved each other all those years ago, Adelaide thought about how far they had come. From that desperate moment in the saloon to this celebration surrounded by love, the journey had been incredible. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, pulling her closer. "Everything," Adelaide said. "How we met, how we fell in love, how we built this life. How lucky I am that you were in that saloon that day." "I was thinking the same thing," Harrison admitted. "Well, not about being in the saloon, but about luck, about fate, about how some random choice I made to go into town that particular day led to everything good in my life." "Do you think it was fate?" Adelaide asked. "Or just chance?" "Does it matter?" Harrison replied. "Either way, I found you. Or you found me, and we found each other. That is what matters." They continued to dance as their children and grandchildren, for Henry had married and had 2 children of his own, watched and smiled. The fiddle played the same songs that had been popular at their wedding, and for a moment, Adelaide could almost imagine they were young again, just starting out on their adventure together. But she didn't wish to be young again. Every year, every experience, every joy and sorrow had made their love stronger, deeper, more resilient. They had grown together rather than apart, had chosen each other every single day for 25 years. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Adelaide and Harrison stood on the porch of their home, watching the stars come out. Harrison's arm was around her shoulders, and her head rested on his chest, and everything felt right with the world. "You have any regrets?" Harrison asked quietly. "Not a single one," Adelaide replied immediately. "Do you?" "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," Harrison said, "so we could have had even more years together." "We have many years ahead still," Adelaide said firmly. "I plan to love you for at least another 25. "Only 25, Harrison teased. "I was hoping for 40 or 50. Adelaide laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been when she was young. "All right then, 50 more years. It is a deal." They sealed the deal with a kiss, still sweet even after decades of marriage, still full of promise and passion and devotion. The next years brought more changes, as years always do. Harrison finally retired from the active work of ranching, turning over full control to Thomas while remaining as an advisor. Adelaide stepped back from teaching, training a younger woman to take her place at the school. They spent their days tending the large garden Adelaide had always dreamed of, taking long rides through the countryside, and spoiling their growing number of grandchildren. Sarah married a fellow doctor and gave them 3 more grandchildren. Henry's wife gave birth to twins, bringing their grandchild count to 7. The house was often full of noise and chaos as children ran through the rooms that had once been so quiet, and Adelaide and Harrison loved every minute of it. On a warm summer evening, 32 years after their first meeting, Adelaide and Harrison sat on the porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Harrison's hair was fully gray now, and Adelaide's blonde locks had silver threads running through them. Their hands, clasped together as they rocked in companionable silence, were weathered and marked with age spots and scars from a lifetime of work. "You remember," Adelaide said suddenly, "that first night when you brought me here, when I cried myself to sleep in that bedroom?" "I remember," Harrison said. "I sat out here on this porch, wondering if I had done the right thing by bringing home a stranger." "And what did you decide?" Adelaide asked, though she knew the answer. "That it was the rightest thing I had ever done," Harrison replied. "I knew it even then, though I tried to tell myself I was just being charitable." "When did you know you loved me?" Adelaide asked. It was a question they had asked each other many times over the years, and the answer changed depending on Harrison's mood. This time, he thought carefully before answering. "I think I loved you from that first moment in the saloon when you whispered you had lost everything. There was so much pain in your voice, but also so much strength. You were broken but not defeated. I saw all of that in an instant, and something in me responded to it. But I knew I loved you, really knew it, the first time you laughed. Do you remember? When I asked if you could cook and you said better than I could," Adelaide smiled at the memory. "I remember. I had not laughed in so long, and it felt strange, like I had forgotten how, but also like coming home." "When did you know you loved me?" Harrison asked, turning the question back on her. "I think I knew when you taught me to ride," Adelaide said slowly. "You were so patient, even when I fell off 3 times in one afternoon. You never got frustrated or made me feel stupid. You just kept encouraging me, kept believing in me. No one had believed in me like that since my parents died. That is when I knew you were special. That is when I knew I could trust you with my heart." They sat in silence for a while, each lost in memories of their life together. The good times and the hard times, the laughter and the tears, the triumphs and the setbacks. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. "I would do it all again," Adelaide said suddenly. "Every single moment, even the hard ones. It all led us here to this life, to this love." "So would I," Harrison agreed, "though I might try to convince you to marry me faster. 6 weeks was too long to wait." Adelaide laughed and squeezed his hand. "We had the rest of our lives together. What was 6 weeks in the grand scheme of things? An eternity when you are in love, Harrison replied. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Adelaide thought about how perfect this moment was. How perfect their life was. She had come to Bannack broken and desperate, with nothing but a carpetbag and a heart full of grief. And she had found everything she had never known she needed. A home, a purpose, a love that had sustained her through decades of joy and challenge. Harrison Tate had been right all those years ago. She had found him, and it had been a start. But it had been so much more than a start. It had been the beginning of a love story that had spanned decades and created a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren. "Thank you," Adelaide whispered into the gathering darkness. "For what?" Harrison asked. "For being in that saloon that day. For offering help to a desperate stranger. For loving me even when I was too broken to love myself. For building this life with me. For everything." Harrison lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for having the courage to accept my help. For trusting me when you had every reason not to trust anyone. For loving me back. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to smile every single day. Thank you for being my everything." They sat together as the stars came out one by one, content in the knowledge that they had lived a good life, loved well, and left the world better than they had found it. Their story, which had begun with such pain and desperation, had become one of hope and healing and enduring love. And as the moon rose over the Montana mountains, casting silver light across the ranch they had built together, Adelaide Foster Tate and Harrison Tate held hands and counted themselves among the luckiest people who had ever lived. They had found each other when they both needed it most, and they had built something beautiful together. Something that would last long after they were gone, in the hearts of their children and grandchildren, and in the community they had served so faithfully. Years later, when both had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their children found a letter Adelaide had written shortly before her death. In it, she recounted their story for future generations, wanting them to know how it had all begun. She wrote about stumbling into that saloon, desperate and alone. She wrote about Harrison's kindness and his simple offer of help. She wrote about how one moment of compassion had changed both their lives forever. The letter ended with these words: "When you have lost everything, as I did all those years ago, it is hard to imagine that life could ever be good again. But I am here to tell you that it can be. That one person's kindness can change your entire world. That love can heal even the deepest wounds. Your grandfather said to me on the day we met that I had found him, and that was a start. He was right. It was a start, but it was also a middle and an end and a new beginning all at once. He was everything I did not know I was looking for, and I hope I was the same for him. Remember this, my dear children and grandchildren. No matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of a new beginning. There is always love if you are brave enough to reach for it." The letter became a treasured family heirloom, passed down through generations as a reminder of where they had come from and the love that had founded their family. Adelaide and Harrison's great-great-grandchildren still lived on the ranch, still told stories about the desperate woman who had stumbled into a saloon and the rancher who had given her hope. Their love story became legend in Bannack, a reminder that even in the hardest times, kindness and courage could change everything. The ranch itself, which Thomas had passed to his son, who passed it to his daughter, who passed it to her son, still bore the Tate name. The original house, where Adelaide had first slept as a guest and later lived as a wife and mother, was preserved as it had been, a museum to the family's history. Visitors could see the bedroom where Adelaide had cried her first night there, The kitchen where she had cooked thousands of meals, the porch where she and Harrison had courted and later grown old together. But more than the physical spaces, what remained was the spirit of generosity and love that Adelaide and Harrison had embodied. The family continued the tradition of helping others, of offering kindness to strangers, of believing in the power of one person to make a difference in another's life. They ran programs for displaced youth, offered internships to aspiring ranchers, and maintained a scholarship fund for students pursuing education despite financial hardship. In the center of Bannack, a statue was erected honoring Adelaide and Harrison Tate for their contributions to the community. The inscription reads simply, "She had lost everything. He offered hope. Together they built a legacy of love." It became a popular spot for couples to visit, to take photographs, to promise each other the kind of enduring love Adelaide and Harrison had shared. Their story proved that even in the rough and tumble world of the Wild West, where life was hard and survival was never guaranteed, love could flourish. That two broken people could find each other and become whole. That kindness was never wasted, that generosity of spirit could change the world, that hope was always worth holding on to. Adelaide Foster had whispered she had lost everything on that dusty day in the summer of 1867. And Harrison Tate had replied that she had found him, and that was a start. Neither of them could have known in that moment how true those words would prove to be. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had found everything they needed. They had built a love that lasted a lifetime, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that continued long after they were gone. It was, indeed, quite a start.